Welcome, dear listener, to another journey back in time. As the modern world fades into the background, I invite you to settle in, find a comfortable position, and allow your mind to wander through the mists of history. Tonight's tale is designed to help you unwind, to ease the tensions of your day, and perhaps to guide you gently toward peaceful slumber as we explore a most curious historical scenario. I always wonder where in the world you might be listening from. Perhaps you're winding down after a long day, or maybe you're seeking a midday moment of calm. I'd love to know where you are and what time it is in your corner of the world. Please share in the comments below. It brings me such joy to see our community of history enthusiasts gathering from across the globe. If you find yourself drawn into tonight's historical journey, consider subscribing so you won't miss future explorations of the past. Each story is crafted to transport you to another time while soothing your modern-day worries. Now, let us leave behind the hum of electronics and the glow of screens. Close your eyes if you wish, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to slip through the centuries, back to a time when the world moved at the pace of footsteps and hoofbeats, when the night was truly dark and the morning truly quiet. The first sensation was the scratching of straw against skin, sharp, insistent, nothing like the smooth cotton sheets you remembered falling asleep in. Then came the smell, earthy, animal, with undertones of smoke and something far less pleasant. Your eyes opened to dim light, filtering through what appeared to be a thatched roof, golden dust motes dancing in slanted beams. This was not your bedroom. This was not your century. You sat up with a gasp, heart hammering against your ribs, and took in your surroundings. The space was small, barely 10 feet across, with walls of rough-hewn timber and packed earth floor. A crude wooden door hung slightly ajar, letting in both the morning light and the sounds of a world you recognized only from museum exhibits and historical documentaries. The distant lowing of cattle, the clucking of chickens, human voices calling in accents so thick they barely resembled English. All of it formed a tapestry of sound, utterly foreign to your modern ears. "I must be dreaming," you whispered, but the words hung solid in the air, and the straw beneath your fingers felt all too real. Your clothes had somehow been replaced by a rough spun tunic that itched against your skin. The watch on your wrist was gone, as was your phone. All connections to the world you knew vanished. Panic rose in your throat like bile. You stumbled to your feet, ducking to avoid the low ceiling, and made your way to the door. Pushing it open revealed a scene that confirmed your impossible situation. A small village sprawled before you, not a historical recreation or movie set, but a living, breathing medieval settlement. Chickens scratched in the dirt between timber-framed houses with thatched roofs. A woman in a long dress and head covering drew water from a central well. Two men led an ox-drawn cart piled with firewood down a muddy track that served as the main street. The smell hit you fully now, a pungent mixture of wood smoke, animal dung, unwashed bodies, and cooking food. Your stomach lurched, partly from hunger, partly from the overwhelming sensory assault. As you stood frozen in the doorway, a small boy noticed you and stopped in his tracks. His mouth fell open, and he pointed, shouting something in a language that sounded vaguely like English but was nearly incomprehensible to your modern ears. "Hello?" you called, your voice sounding strange and out of place. "Can anyone tell me where I am? What year is this?" The boy's shout had attracted attention. The woman at the well straightened, shading her eyes to look at you. An older man emerged from a nearby building, wiping his hands on a leather apron. They exchanged words, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The man approached cautiously, as one might approach a potentially dangerous animal. "God give you good day," he said slowly, his accent thick but the words just recognizable enough. be ye lost? From what land do ye hail? His gaze traveled over your face and form, lingering on your clean hands and bewildered expression. I don't know how I got here, you stammered, fighting to keep your voice steady. What village is this? What year? The man's bushy eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. He turned to the growing crowd of onlookers and said something that caused murmurs and a few nervous laughs. When he turned back to you, his expression had softened slightly. "Ye be in West Hampton, under the protection of Lord Geoffrey. The year of our Lord is 1243, as any Christian soul would know." The world seemed to tilt beneath your feet. 1243, nearly 800 years in the past. You grabbed the rough wooden doorframe to steady yourself, mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Time travel wasn't possible. Yet the evidence of your senses was overwhelming. "He must be touched in the head," said a woman's voice from the crowd. "Or perhaps a foreigner, from very far lands." "Nay, look at his manner. He is a fool or simpleton," another replied. "God marks such souls for his own protection." The leather-aproned man, a blacksmith, you realized, noting the forge behind him, stepped closer. "Can you work, stranger? Have ye a trade? Or be ye a scholar, perhaps, with such soft hands?" Before you could answer, your attention was caught by something in the distance, the top of what appeared to be a stone tower rising above the trees beyond the village. Something about its shape triggered a memory, a connection to the world you knew. "That building," you said, pointing. "What is that?" "The Abbey of St. Michael," the blacksmith replied, crossing himself, "where the holy brothers keep their prayers and their learning." A plan began to form in your mind. If you were truly trapped in medieval England, you needed to orient yourself, to find landmarks that might have survived into your own time. The Abbey might be such a place. Old churches often stood for centuries. And if it contained learned men, perhaps someone there might better understand your bizarre situation. "I need to go there," you said, taking a step forward. The villagers parted, some making furtive signs against evil. The blacksmith frowned. "It be 3 miles hence, and the brothers do not welcome all who come. What business have ye with them?" You searched for an answer that would make sense in this world. I have knowledge that may be of interest to them. Books and learning." This seemed to satisfy him, though suspicion remained in his eyes. "Bartholomew," he called, and a gangly youth of perhaps 16 stepped forward. "Show this stranger the path to St. Michael's, then return straight away." As you prepared to follow the boy, the blacksmith caught your arm. His grip was iron, his calloused hand rough against your skin. "A word of caution, stranger. These be troubled times. King Henry's men pass through often, and they look kindly on neither vagabonds nor foreign spies. Whatever your purpose here, tread carefully." You nodded, throat dry. The boy Bartholomew was already walking away, glancing back impatiently. With one last look at the village, the only familiar point in this unfamiliar world, you followed him, stepping carefully along the muddy path. Your mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Was there any way back? And most pressingly, how would you survive in a world 8 centuries before your birth, where everything from the language to the microbes was potentially deadly to an unprepared modern person? The sun climbed higher as you walked, illuminating a landscape both familiar and alien. The rolling hills and forests resembled the English countryside you knew, yet wilder, more expansive, dotted with fewer settlements, and no sign of modern infrastructure. No power lines, no distant hum of highways, no contrails in the sky. Just the vast silence of a world not yet transformed by industrialization, where human voices and natural sounds were the only break in the quiet. Ahead, the stone tower of St. Michael's Abbey grew larger, a beacon of civilization in this wilderness. Whether it held answers or merely more questions remained to be seen, but it was the only direction that made sense in a world turned suddenly, bewilderingly medieval. The path to St. Michael's Abbey wound through a patchwork of fields where peasants stooped over their work, backs bent like question marks against the sky. Bartholomew trotted ahead, occasionally glancing back to ensure I followed, his bare feet navigating the rutted path with practiced ease. As we approached the abbey's outer walls, the boy suddenly veered left toward a cluster of modest dwellings nestled against the protective shadow of the monastery. "My Uncle Thomas lives there," he announced, pointing to a workshop with wood shavings scattered about its entrance. "He makes barrels for the abbey's ale and wine. He might take you in for work. He's always complaining his hands aren't enough for all the orders." Thomas the Cooper proved to be a broad-shouldered man with a face weathered like old leather, his powerful arms testament to years of bending wood to his will. After Bartholomew's breathless explanation of finding me near the village, Thomas studied me with narrowed eyes. "You've the look of a man who's never worked with his hands," he observed bluntly. "But I need help, and the monks say charity earns God's favor." His wife Agnes, a woman whose quiet efficiency seemed to hold their modest household together, offered me a wooden bowl of thin pottage without comment, her eyes kinder than her husband's, but equally assessing. The next morning began my education in medieval labor. "Hold it so," Thomas demonstrated, positioning a curved stave against the forming barrel. My fingers, accustomed to keyboards and touch screens, fumbled clumsily with tools that felt alien in my grasp. By midday, my hands were raw with blisters, and Thomas's patience had worn nearly as thin as my own. "Christ's wounds, man! Have you never held a draw knife before?" he exclaimed after I nearly sliced my thumb. I could only shake my head, earning a bewildered stare. That night, Agnes silently applied a pungent salve to my bleeding hands before handing me a threadbare blanket for my corner of their one-room dwelling. Days passed in a blur of aching muscles and slow improvement. Thomas's 2 children, a girl of perhaps 10 named Emma, and a boy of 7 called Will, watched me with undisguised curiosity, occasionally giggling at my mistakes, but eventually offering small corrections. "No, like this," little Emma would say, demonstrating how to hold a tool with surprising strength in her tiny hands. Gradually, calluses formed where blisters had been, and Thomas's corrections became less frequent, his nods of approval more common. I learned to shape staves, fit iron hoops, and test barrels for leaks, skills utterly useless in my former life but now essential to my survival. "Tomorrow is market day in the town," Thomas announced one evening as we sat around the smoky hearth. "You'll come with me to deliver barrels to the tavern keeper." I nodded, secretly relieved at the prospect of seeing more of this medieval world beyond the cooper's yard. That night, I lay awake on my straw pallet, listening to the family's breathing in the darkness, wondering if I would ever see my own time again, or if this was now my life. Learning to bend wood instead of data, measuring time by the sun rather than digital displays. The market square buzzed with an energy that reminded me of festivals in my own time, though the sights and smells were worlds apart. Vendors called their wares in accented English that sometimes required careful listening to understand. Thomas's barrels loaded safely onto the tavern keeper's cart. We wandered the market where fish, vegetables, cloth, and livestock created a patchwork of medieval commerce. I was examining a blacksmith's wares when a sudden hush fell over the crowd. Make way for Lord Geoffrey," voices called as people pressed themselves against buildings and stalls. The procession that entered the square displayed wealth in stark contrast to the muddy surroundings. Knights on horseback flanked a nobleman whose velvet cloak and gold-trimmed tunic would have cost a peasant family years of labor. Behind him rode ladies with elaborate headdresses, servants carrying banners, and finally, guards driving a cart of provisions. As they passed, I noticed hollow-eyed children watching from shadows, their gaunt faces fixed on the nobleman's abundance. One small boy darted forward toward an apple that had fallen from the cart, only to be cuffed sharply by a guard. Thomas gripped my arm as I instinctively moved to intervene. "That's not your place," he muttered. "Lord Geoffrey holds power of life and death here." The stark inequality of medieval life had never been so clear to me as in that moment. The Lord's procession, a river of color and plenty flowing through a landscape of desperate need. Thomas seemed to read my thoughts. "It's always been thus," he said with resignation. "They have their world, we have ours." But I could not accept such division as natural, my modern sensibilities rebelling against what medieval folk took as divine order. As we prepared to return to Thomas's home, commotion erupted near the abbey gates. A monk was arguing with market guards over a thin man in ragged clothing. "This man needs sanctuary and care, not your prison," the monk insisted, his tonsured head barely reaching the guard's shoulder. Something in his passionate defense reminded me of activist friends from my own time. The guards eventually relented, allowing the monk to lead the trembling man toward the abbey. Thomas nodded with approval. "Brother Ambrose," he explained, "always fighting for the least of God's children. The abbot tolerates his outbursts because his knowledge of herbs and medicines has saved many lives." The following day, as I struggled with a particularly stubborn barrel hoop, a novice from the abbey appeared at the workshop door. "Brother Ambrose requests the stranger's help," he announced, eyes widening slightly as he looked at me. Thomas frowned at the interruption, but nodded permission. "Be back before Vespers," he instructed, as I set down my tools with poorly concealed relief. The novice led me through the abbey gates into a world of ordered tranquility that contrasted sharply with the chaotic village life. Brother Ambrose proved to be a small, wiry man, with intelligent eyes that seemed to look through rather than at me. "You're not from any village nearby," he stated rather than asked as he led me to the infirmary. "I need someone who can read and write, and Thomas says you speak strangely enough to be educated." I nodded, surprised at how quickly he had assessed me. The infirmary held several pallets where the sick lay in various states of distress. "Help me record the treatments and results," Ambrose instructed, handing me a piece of parchment and a quill, tools familiar in concept but utterly foreign in practice. As days passed, I divided my time between Thomas's workshop and Brother Ambrose's infirmary. The monk's kindness extended beyond his patience to me, offering not just sanctuary from the hardest physical labor, but also access to the monastery's precious library. "You read Latin," he observed one evening as he caught me examining a manuscript. It wasn't a question. "And Greek. Yet you know nothing of cooperage or farming. You're a mystery, friend." His eyes held mine, not accusatory but genuinely curious. "Perhaps one day you'll trust me enough to tell your true story." That night, in the quiet of the monastery guest cell Ambrose had arranged for me, I stared at the stone ceiling and contemplated my strange fate. My hands, once soft and skilled only at typing, now bore the calluses of a cooper's apprentice. My mind, once filled with deadlines and digital concerns, now catalogued herbal remedies and barrel-making techniques. I was adapting to this medieval world day by day, finding unexpected allies in Thomas's grudging respect, Agnes's quiet care, and Brother Ambrose's intellectual curiosity. Whether I would ever return to my own time remained unknown, but for now I had found a tenuous place between these worlds, learning to survive by wit and the fortune of kind, if bewildered, strangers. The fever struck without warning. One moment I was grinding herbs for Brother Ambrose in the infirmary. The next my vision swam with dark spots and my legs gave way beneath me. I heard the monk's alarmed voice calling my name as if from underwater, felt cool hands guiding me to a pallet, and then darkness claimed me completely. The fever dreams came in waves of terrifying clarity. I was walking through West Hampton, but the village shifted constantly between centuries. One moment I passed Thomas's workshop with its familiar scent of fresh-cut wood and saw Agnes hanging laundry on a line. The next, the same spot held a petrol station, its fluorescent lights harsh against the night sky. People from my modern life walked alongside medieval villagers, neither group acknowledging the other's existence. My mother called my name from inside a thatched cottage, but when I entered, I found myself in my childhood bedroom with its computer humming in the corner. "The fever burns too hot," I heard Brother Ambrose say from somewhere beyond the veil of my delirium. "We must cool the body before the humors become further imbalanced." Cold cloths pressed against my forehead, neck, and wrists, but the fire inside me raged undiminished. In my dreams, I tried to explain antibiotics to the monk, my tongue forming words my medieval companions couldn't possibly understand. I babbled about penicillin and intravenous fluids, while Brother Ambrose murmured prayers over me. Days and nights blurred together. Sometimes I woke briefly to sip water or broth, only to fall back into the swirling vortex where past and future collided. I saw Bartholomew as an old man, his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes still bright with mischief. I witnessed Emma, Thomas's daughter, teaching her own children to spin wool. Most disturbing were the visions of plague, black-robed figures with beaked masks moving through streets littered with corpses. I tried to warn them, to explain about fleas and rats and quarantine, but my words emerged as meaningless sounds. "His mind wanders far from us." Brother Ambrose's voice penetrated my haze. "I fear we may lose him to this malady." "The brother's remedies have done nothing," came Thomas's gruff response. I hadn't realized he had come to visit me. "Perhaps it is time to seek other help." "You speak of the widow Edith," Brother Ambrose said, his tone cautious. "The abbot would not approve." "The abbot is not dying in this bed," Thomas replied flatly. "I will fetch her myself." The next time I surfaced from my fever dreams, a new presence attended me. Gnarled hands, strong despite their age, lifted my head. A woman's voice, deep and assured, instructed me to drink. The liquid tasted bitter and earthy, nothing like Brother Ambrose's honey-sweetened remedies. I coughed, but managed to swallow most of it. "Good," the voice approved. "Now sleep, wanderer. Your journey is not yet complete." I slipped back into dreams, but these were different, calmer, more ordered. I saw a woman gathering plants by moonlight, her movements deliberate and reverent. She spoke to each plant before cutting it, thanking it for its sacrifice. The same woman attended childbirths, eased the passing of the elderly, and taught young girls which herbs would ease monthly pains. In my dream, I followed her through the forest, watching as she read the language of nature with the same fluency that I had once read my smartphone screen. When I next opened my eyes with true awareness, the widow Edith sat beside my pallet. She was older than I had expected, her face a map of wrinkles, her silver hair bound in a simple braid. Her eyes, however, were sharp and knowing, the eyes of someone who had seen much and forgotten nothing. "You return to us," she said simply, placing a cool hand on my forehead. "The fever has broken." "How long?" My voice emerged as a croak. "7 days you've wandered between worlds," she replied, helping me sip water from a wooden cup. "Longer than most." Brother Ambrose appeared in the doorway, his face lighting with relief when he saw me conscious. "Thanks be to God," he murmured, making the sign of the cross. "And to your remedies, Edith," he added more quietly. The monk's bloodletting would have finished what the fever began. Edith said without rancor. He needed to sweat out the poison, not lose what strength remained to him. As my strength gradually returned over the following days, I learned that Edith was both respected and feared in the village. The common folk sought her help for everything from toothaches to difficult births. Yet the church viewed her practices with suspicion. Brother Ambrose was unusual in his willingness to acknowledge her skill, though even he did so discreetly. She knows things that aren't in our manuscripts, he confided one afternoon while checking my recovery. Plants that grow in our very forests that Galen never described. Methods that seem simple but work when our complex preparations fail. Why don't you learn from her? I asked. Brother Ambrose smiled sadly. Some of my brothers would consider that dangerous folly. Knowledge from women, especially those who live alone in the forest, is suspect by its very nature. Edith visited daily, bringing fresh infusions and checking my progress with experienced hands. She spoke little but observed much. One evening, as twilight filled my small cell with shadows, she finally asked the question I had been dreading. "You are not of this time, are you?" Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were commenting on the weather. I stared at her, speechless. "Your fever talk was strange," she continued, unperturbed by my silence. "You spoke of wonders and terrors unknown to us. And your hands," she gestured to my palms, "they bear no lifetime of labor, despite the recent calluses." "If I told you the truth, you would think me mad or possessed," I finally replied. Edith's laugh was unexpectedly warm. "I am an old woman who talks to plants and reads the future in scattered stones. Who am I to judge another's strangeness?" So I told her everything, my modern life, my inexplicable awakening in this medieval world, my struggles to adapt. She listened without interruption, her weathered face betraying neither disbelief nor fear. "The old stories speak of such things," she said when I had finished. "Souls that slip between the cracks of time. It happens at certain places, certain moments when the veil grows thin." "Can I go back?" I asked, voicing the question that had haunted me since my arrival. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you were sent here for a purpose." She rose to leave, placing a small pouch of dried herbs beside my bed. "Brew this at daybreak tomorrow. It will help you see more clearly." That night I slept deeply and without dreams for the first time since my fever began. I woke just before dawn, my mind unusually clear. I brewed Edith's herbs as instructed and sipped the earthy tea while watching the sun rise through my narrow window. As light gradually filled the world, I found myself facing the question that had been forming since my recovery began. What should I do with my knowledge of the future in this medieval present? I could warn them of the coming plague, teach them about sanitation and quarantine. I could introduce concepts from modern medicine that might save countless lives. But I also remembered enough history to know how those who challenged established beliefs were often treated. The same knowledge that might help could also mark me as a heretic or a witch. By the time Brother Ambrose came to check on me, I had reached my decision. I would share what I could, carefully and selectively. I would teach Brother Ambrose about boiling water for wounds and the importance of clean hands in the infirmary. I would help Thomas design barrels that might keep food preserved longer. But I would do so gradually, presenting ideas as humble suggestions rather than revolutionary concepts. "You seem changed this morning," Brother Ambrose observed. "The fever has left you, but something else has taken its place." "Clarity," I replied. "I know now that I am here for a reason. Whether I ever return to my own time or not, there are things I can teach, and much more I can learn." As I spoke those words, I felt a strange peace settle over me. The medieval world was no longer just a bizarre circumstance to be endured until escape became possible. It had become a second home, filled with people I had come to care for deeply. Whatever knowledge I could safely share might create tiny ripples in the stream of history, perhaps too small to change its course, but enough to ease some suffering along its banks.